everyone, good afternoon. You're listening to Talking Jobs with me, rbromnick. And today the topic of interest is social work. Some of you may have thought about this. I suspect that many of you don't think about social work as a possible opportunity. And really what we're doing today is trying to encourage you to be aware of this as a really good opportunity. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about social work. Now, I researched this podcast in a slightly different way than usual. And what I did was I thought, let's imagine I'm qualified as a social worker. What sort of jobs are there out there? So these are the ones that caught my eye. I saw something going in Child Protection Trust in Nottingham, working with trauma services to help support people separated by child migration. This was international specialist work. I thought, I'd rather like that. There was something down in Devon working for adoption and fostering services, helping people find the right child and doing training and working on panels and helping people with placements. I thought, gosh, that's very positive. I like the look of that as well. And one more I'll tell you about. Some of you know that I'm interested in older adults, and a wonderful job for a social worker on the beautiful island of Jersey. Helping older people, promoting independence and autonomy, and helping people really with dignity in later life. That was what I got from that job. So I thought social work, wow, that's fantastic. Other roles out there for working with people with learning difficulties, young offenders, people with mental health problems, working in drug and alcohol services with the homeless. So a huge range of different client groups that psychology graduates as well as others might be interested in exploring. Now, I've only just scratched the surface, so stay tuned and I'll introduce you to today's wonderful guest who'll help us delve deeper into the world of social work. This is Rob Goemans! Yay! Welcome, Rob.
Thank you, Rachel.
I really appreciate coming along and helping support this project. So, not many of our students or our listeners will have had the wonderful opportunity to meet you. So I wonder if we could just start, if you'd introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work history and the sort of, about social work.
Okay, yes, I can do that. I teach here at the university within the School of Health and Social Care. I'm a registered social worker, and largely most of my teaching is around mental health. Before that, I was a proper mental health social worker. I worked in various management positions. I was a lead social worker for our local mental health trust. And prior to that, I worked in a number of crisis teams and mental health services around inner London. And that was sort of my social work career. Before my social work career, I did do a psychology degree.
Yeah, for psychology. That's partly why I invited you, because I thought I knew that.
Before I did my psychology degree, I did a degree in horticultural business management. I'm not sure that's quite as relevant.
We're not advocating that people need to do that.
No. One day I'm going to find a way of combining all three.
There is quite a lot about therapeutic gardening.
There hugely is. Therapeutic uses of horticulture and therapeutic uses of music, which is another interest of mine. There's a lot of those sort of things. Because we haven't got a clue what mental health is, and we're taking stabs all over the place to try and work that out and fill in the deficits of what our mental health services aren't actually helping people, and so therefore looking at exercise, at gardening, at painting, at music, at anything that we possibly can to try and resolve this problem. I guess in a way that's what makes mental health so fascinating.
It really is. So what was your work around interventions in mental health, or?
Yes, most of my jobs that I did, and I worked a lot of different sort of jobs in different areas, but most of them were in what's called crisis teams, and people may have heard of crisis teams. And most people who have heard of crisis teams will probably heard quite bad things about them, so they do get a pretty bad reputation.
Well, before we return to that, I must say, out of all the people that I've interviewed for this Talking Jobs series, I think social workers don't have a good national reputation.
No. Well, and I suppose combining crisis teams, which have a bad reputation, and social worker within a crisis team is probably sort of makes it double.
Adding children, and then it becomes really bad.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot, as you kind of hint at, there's a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions about what social work really is. So I guess if we were sort of take a step back and sort of think about that, you go around Sainsbury's and ask someone what they think social workers do or what they think of social workers, they'll probably give you a fairly poor quality answer. They'll probably say, so we don't think a lot of social workers.
No.
And they'll probably think that social workers work purely with children. We've had a lot of, when social workers get in the media, it's usually related to a child death. So we had the death of Peter Connolly, baby P, a few years ago, and there was a lot of talk around social work then and the problems with social work, and the government have responded to that by making a lot of changes to social work. And this is all despite the fact that the GP saw Peter Connolly the day before and missed the fact that he had a fractured spine. No one's talking about GPs, a lot of talk about social workers when there isn't necessarily quite the same level of implication of wrongdoing by social workers in the case. So, there is a problem with the image of social work. And part of that problem is the fact that it's not that easy to explain what social work is, although your listeners can be the judge of that by the end of this podcast. But also, people don't know much about social work. They don't know what it's for, how it works. It's not that easy to understand. But also, the people that we work with the people on the margins of society. And society doesn't really want to take ownership of those people. Otherwise, they have to acknowledge that social problems are a function of what society does. And people in society don't really want to take that on board. So marginalising those people and ignoring those people, they kind of ignore and marginalise social workers too.
Right, because they're working with those people. Absolutely.
So by implication, if those people have to be invisible in order for society to operate, social work has to be invisible too.
So that's what social worker is not. It's not some of those myths about messing up childcare or not protecting vulnerable children when they should, which might be those myths. You said it's hard to articulate.
It is hard to. I suppose on a basic level, there's children's social work and adult social work. There's about 30,000 children's social workers in the country. There's about 20,000 adult social workers in the country. So there's a rough split between the two. Having said that, social work's a generic profession. It is important to understand that social workers work right across the board with people with social problems. That would be the easiest way of that I could understand it, that I could explain it. People have social problems. They're not evenly distributed. Housing or
drug or alcohol. I'm trying to think what is a social problem.
Social problems are a wide category. But, there's a bunch of people in society who have problems with the way society works and that they don't fit into the processes of society. Yeah, I think things like employment, housing, education, social networks, money, sex, all those kind of things are things that if you have, they will protect you against social problems. The social problems are, mental ill health, abuse, homelessness, etc. And I think if social work is anything, it's using an understanding of how people work and how society works in order to work with those people. So the same way a nurse uses an understanding of how the body works to work with people whose body isn't working properly for them. Social workers use an understanding of how society works and how people work, sociology and psychology, in order to work with people who society isn't working for them. Society's got certain clear processes, and those processes advantage certain people and disadvantage other people. And we work with the people that are on the losing end of that.
Hard to do sometimes. Challenging? Rewarding? Challenging?
I don't know. It is and it isn't. People say, when you say to someone, I work with mental health or I'm a social worker, people say, that must be very difficult. And you say, well, not really. I'd find it difficult being an accountant. I really would struggle with that. I find it much easier being a mental health social worker than being a police officer. So it's about different, horses for courses. If you're interested in complexity and shades of grey, then go to social work. If you want things to be defined and clear and articulated and don't be a social worker. No. But social workers working in murky, chaotic, complex situations, and you're often very isolated on your own in a social situation with a family or with some people, trying to make sense of all this stuff that's being thrown at you in this family, and trying to use an understanding of law and social theory and psychology and values to try and make sense of this and chart a route through it that's going to help people. And you've got to be taking as a central guide for that, what the people actually want. It's a very person-centred, relationship-based profession.
Let's just talk about what you think would be the qualities of somebody applying for social work. Because some of those resilience skills, they're developing.
Absolutely. Most of those skills you can develop. You can learn the law.
Yeah.
You can learn sociology and psychological and social policy theory. The bit you can't learn, I think, is the values.
Right.
So, like I said, social work is very much a person-centred career. We don't do to, we do with.
Right.
You want to do to, go and be a doctor. You know, if you want to do with, then you be a social worker. You know, we work out what people want and try and support them in achieving that where it's appropriate, and where it's not appropriate, we guide them in different ways. But I think social work starts with acknowledgement that society isn't fair, and as a result, some people will lose out from that. You know, if anyone thinks society is fair, then, well...
maybe choose something else.
yeah, or maybe, yeah. So, you know, society isn't fair, and if you know, that's got to be your starting point. So there's a concept of social justice, that actually, you know, society is unjust, and actually we need to be pursuing justice for people who are losing out from that process. You know, the likes of Boris Johnson had it very easy in this world. There's a lot of people who never had any of those opportunities, or any of the opportunities that we've had to develop things, to understand things in a certain way. So those are the people we work with. So an understanding of that concept of social justice. But I think, yeah, the other concept I'd say would be really important is the concept of rights. People have a right to certain things, and we don't take those rights away without really thinking about it. You know, when people start to develop dementia, and they start to lose their ability to make decisions for themselves, what's most important in that situation, I believe, is that we do everything we can to support that person's ability to make those decisions. You know, to prolong that as long as we possibly can, of them having some input. And even when they can't make the decisions, you know, we use a piece of law called the Mental Capacity Act to work in that situation. But even in that situation where they can't make decisions, there's still things you can do to work with, to understand that person, who that person is, and what rights they've got in terms of making their decisions, making their own choices. The more you can understand that person, talk to their family, if they look at pictures of them, understand who that person is. If you're just going to ride in roughshod and override their decisions and go, right, this is what we've got to do, then... The
ultimate sort of solution.
Absolutely.
You know. Yeah, so I think from comparison with other talks that I've created here, Rob, social work sounds more political.
It is political.
You know, other people have maybe talked about the political environment in terms of, let's say, with teaching, there's cuts that limit resources, but it sounds intrinsically more of a political career than
it absolutely is. I'd say, you know, in terms of sort of theoretical background, I'd say sociology and psychology and social policy are the things that influence, but politics is kind of the fourth bit of that. You know, yes, in terms of austerity and cuts and policy that's given down to us from government, it's inherently political in that way, but it's also inherently political in our seeking to understand what lies behind social problems. And I think, you know, you can almost map that onto right-wing and left-wing kind of conceptualizations, as in a right-wing conceptualization that social problems are the result of individual choices, whereas a more left-wing, and this is sort of a bit reductionist and black and white, but a left-wing position would be that social problems are the function of the way society is structured, and that does map onto those sort of broad political spectrums. But, you know, if we look at society, we know that in our society at the moment, black people are twice as likely to be unemployed as white people. Well, if you're explaining that through individual choices, then that's incredibly racist in the implications of that. Actually, we know that people are distributed in different ways, urban and rural. People have different opportunities, different barriers placed in their participation within society, and it's those kind of structural understandings that actually determine the fact that black people are twice as likely to be unemployed at the moment. We have a horribly racist society and a very sexist, disablist, etc. So, you know, if you're keen on that complexity of thought, of trying to pick that stuff apart, yes, that is political, and, you know, unashamedly so. I think we need to, you know, what is politics if you can't actually explain to us what is going on for real people? How it affects
the individual person and their families and their communities and things.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Right, Rob, so let's imagine you're a psychology student and you think, I want to do this.
Still.
Rather than I want to run away.
Absolutely.
Well, I think the thing is, Rob, you present it to me as being very real. And there's no point in us doing this series of talking jobs and just talking about everything like it would be in the classroom.
Absolutely.
You know, that you're going to meet someone, it's going to be easy. And, you know, the professionals that we're talking to, you're all highly trained and the work you do is complex.
Well, our classroom's pretty real too. We try and keep things real. You know, this is the way we talk about stuff here on our courses.
Right.
But in terms of qualifying, you've got to do is a minimum of degree level, but you can enter social work either at a degree level or at a master's level. So if people have done, I mean, I obviously did an undergraduate psychology degree, and then later on I did a master's in social work, which qualified me, and I was able to then register with a professional regulator, etc. So at Lincoln we do a Masters in Social Work.
That's 2 years?
It's a 2-year course because there's 170 days of placement within that. You can't really just do the theoretical stuff without going into work situations, doing two sort of you do a 70-day placement in the first year, you do a 100-day placement in the second year. And you're quite closely linked in with the university so that we can talk about how the theory, the interventions, the skills, the values, the law, etc. that we're teaching you here, how that works in practice. And so it's a 2-year because of the placement.
But the teaching's quite lively, I understand.
Well,
let's go back to the bursary.
There's money.
Show me the bottom line.
So
there are some grants.
So there are some grants. There is still financial support with social work. So
because there is a need for people to train.
Oh, there's a huge need. I'm not entirely sure this government agrees with that. But we still have.
Well, when I looked at vacancies, there was loads.
Well, yes, there are. I mean, it's not the worst.
If people are toying up different ideas, then they certainly find work when they graduate.
Absolutely. Well, we can hope so. Yes.
So there are some grants. They sign up for a 2-year programme.
Yep.
And you do some exciting teaching, I know, because I've heard about your house.
Oh, there. Yeah, we had the house. We got the clinical suites here at Sarah Swift. We got some. Yeah, we try and put people into real situations and see how they respond.
So it's very practical, the training, as well as the theory and things.
Well, those sort of things are really important. You know, if you're doing sort of an exercise type thing, you've got to use the muscles to get the exercise going. To feel the effects. So you apply that to values and understanding a complex situation. You actually got to get those values working. In the same way that you get muscle groups working if we're teaching sports science. So you've got to get that stuff where you've got to make it seem real. You've got to get people to understand the complexity of stuff. So we get people in who are going to challenge people. We get people with real life experience, with practitioners, service users, as well as the placement stuff. Of course, but what makes it real for me is the students on the course. When they get to the end of the course, they're excited. They validated it by saying, yes, that really worked. It changed me as a person. That was a journey. This is the kind of things people talk about. So I'm not going to say, yes, come on, our course is great. I will say our students say that it was awesome and that it gave them a lot and it questioned them and challenged them, and they came out the other side a better, more rounded person. That sounds really trite now, but it's true. And it's a developmental
transformational
concept. Yeah, totally. It's a threshold concept. It's you move beyond that and you become something else. You can't go back.
So, what academic qualifications will someone need if they're coming through, say, having done a degree, coming onto your postgraduate? Do you look for a 2-1 or a 2?
Well, there's some flexibility in it because if it's like I say, the values are probably one of the most important things. Yes,
so that is almost more important than the academic side.
You kind of need both.
Right.
We have students on our course who write us essays that get 80-90%, and theoretically they're great, full of critical analysis, and they go out on placement and they haven't got a clue how to talk to somebody. Equally, we have students who are great on placement. They're warm, they're empathic, etc. But they can't write an essay, they can't juggle those sort of concepts in an analytical way. To be a social worker, it's kind of hard because you really need both. So we have minimum standards that ensure that we will have both, but we have some flexibility in that. If someone's come from a University of Lincoln psychology degree, then they
have the academic
that's a pretty good
credentials.
Routine. Yeah. We've had people on our masters with all sorts of degrees. One of our best students we had done a degree in dance.
Wow.
I don't think there was much from her dance degree that she brought into the social work, but she was the right person and was intelligent and had the right values. So that it's not that important what you're bringing in academically. We do ask that people bring in some life experience. Obviously, because you need that sort of thing in order to deal with the kind of concepts that we're going to be dealing with. So you've got a good degree and in a relevant profession, you've got some life experience, maybe done some work in an old people's home or a children's home or with some community services within social care of some sort, or done some shadowing. Or if you haven't, come and apply and we'll give you some advice on where to go to get some additional experience. But given what I've said about the nature of the profession, there's certain things that you're going to need to bring with you to do that.
Brilliant. Now, just before we sign off, Rod, there's been quite a few graduate schemes spring up in the last few years. So we've seen like Frontline for Social Work, working with children, and your programme's a university-based course. So
yes.
What do you want to say about that? Because I'll leave it to you. Our listeners can make their own do their own research.
Yeah, no, I
You
absolutely
know,
do. And we've had, the debate, well, explain what these schemes are, there's three of them: Step Up, Frontline and Think Ahead. And the problem with these schemes, well, there's a number of problems with these schemes. They've been very, very poorly welcomed by the profession. They weren't something that the profession identified that they needed. It was something that was sort of forced down on us from the government, who decided that this was something that would be useful. And they're a postgraduate diploma, so they are postgraduate, but they're not at master's level, they're at PG Dip level. But the main problem, I think, in many ways, is that they're specialist. So social work is still a very generic profession. I believe it only makes sense when you look at it generically as go right around the margins of society. If you just train purely as a child's social worker, you kind of lose that understanding of how society works, because you only have that very specific bit. The specialism has to come after. So they're they're aimed to be specialist qualifications, but at the same time they have to meet the HCPC requirements, which requires them to be generic.
Right.
So there's a strange sort of mishmash between that. They're kind of caught between being neither one thing or the other. But on top of that, they're only 14 months long, and that involves 5 weeks academic block at the start, and then you're out on placement for the rest of the 14 months. And I'm concerned about how much people can learn on those. But I've spoken to quite a lot of students on those courses and spent some time with them, and there's some really good high caliber people on them. Frontline being the child protection one, and Think Ahead being the mental health one. And I think there's a lot of benefits from those sort of specialist trained people going into that sort of education. And I think some of the training they get on the placement is of high quality. I just think you can't justify specialism at a training level, and it's still 5 weeks academic bit. It really concerns me. How can you get those values that we were talking about earlier as being so important? How can you drill those into people with that lack of oversight of the teaching? So they concern me. And we've had people that have applied for those and changed their mind and come to us because of some of the things they prefer about our course. And I'm sure there's probably people that have elected to go to those instead of ours. But I think people need to go in with their eyes open.
Well, we'll let people do that research and for themselves. Just one final question. So we offer it here at Lincoln. It's offered at other places around the country. Do people, besides just physical location, when people are choosing undergraduate courses, it might be, we'll come to Lincoln because we're great, like psychology, we're great for student engagement and student satisfaction, or I'm going to go to Warwick because they've got a flight simulator or something like that.
Let's go.
Yeah. So, different departments might have different flavours or specialities. Yes. Would that be true for postgraduate social work?
To an extent, it's kind of difficult to say. I mean, I do work for the HCPC as well, inspecting other social work courses around the country, so I've got a fairly good view of how our course stacks up against others. And I can't say there's a huge difference necessarily. I think, there is a bit of a flavour in different courses and you pick up different things. I think to some extent we've got quite a radical flavour here. We're quite challenging. We don't sit and shut up. We sort of shout about things where people need advocating for and causes need pushing. We're strong on values, but so are all social work courses. We've got a good sort of mental health flavour, I think, within the specialisms that we got. We also run an AMP course. AMPs are the people that go out and section people, as I know you know. And I think, where a university's got an AMP course running alongside a social work course, then it shows that they've got quite a good depth in the mental health.
All right, that might be the psychology students might want to look at that side of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in mental health, don't go on a social work course that doesn't also run an AMP course, because, you could probably ask some very good ones, but the AMP course, that there's going to be specialists there who are going to input into the course potentially. So I guess that's one thing, if you're dead set on wanting to become a children's social worker, then make sure you're applying for a course that's got some really good children's expertise. Look at publications, look at research that people have done, amongst the course team. If you're dead set on being a mental health social worker, do the same, but with mental health. Having said that, I speak to our students on the first week of the course who are dead set on being children's social workers. They're by the second year, by the third year, they're really keen to go and do mental health, or some vice versa. But usually they want to do mental health.
That's great. Well, thanks, Rob. It's interesting, and the work you do is really important.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And what we'll just say, I'll put you on the spot here, just to sign off. If somebody wants to track you down, would you be happy to answer emails and
of course I would.
Things like that? So Thanks, everyone. You've been listening to Talking Jobs with me, Rachel Bromnick, and my guest, Rob Goemans. We'll just say bye. Bye.
Bye.